Hello, powerful people. It's Seth Harris from the Burns Center for Social Change. We had not planned to add an introduction to this emergency blogcast because we wanted to get out to you as soon as possible. But the facts on the ground have changed here in Washington, D.C., so wanted to just make a quick mention of that. This emergency blogcast is about the U.S. government shutdown that at the time we recorded it, which was Friday, September 29th, we expected to happen. We thought at midnight, Saturday night, September 30th, that there would be a government shutdown because Congress would fail to pass any kind of a funding bill. You can actually hear some discussion of that in the blogcast. And then on Saturday, September 30th, the House of Representatives passed a 45-day continuing resolution, a short-term spending bill for the federal government. The Senate passed it several hours later, and President Biden signed it Saturday night. So this conversation was about the effects of a government shutdown on the unionized federal workforce, with the two of the presidents of federal employee unions, Everett Kelly of the American Federation of Government Employees, Doreen Greenwald of the National Treasury Employees Union. We're going to keep these interviews on the blog. Even though the facts have changed and there isn't a government shutdown, we want to keep this blogcast available to you, even though the emergency has passed. And there's three reasons for that. First is the funding bill is only for 45 days. So we could be right back where we thought we were going to be in 45 days, middle of November. And everything that President Greenwald and President Kelly said in this blogcast will apply 45 days from now, except it'll be even more urgent because it'll be right on the verge of the holidays. The second reason we want to leave this blogcast available to you is we think you need to know what the real life of a federal employee is, who these folks are. And the two presidents speak very eloquently, I think, about federal employees and who they are and who their members are, and that they're not these rich bureaucrats sitting around in offices smoking on cigars and deciding things in some cabal conspiracy of the deep state. They're working people just like you. And we wanted you to be able to hear them describe their experience, because it's valuable regardless of whether or not there's a government shutdown. That understanding is so important regardless of the circumstances. And then finally, the reason we want you to hear this blogcast now, even without the government shutdown, is in each of the two interviews, we talked a little bit at the end of each interview about organizing and how these two unions are doing in organizing. And like conversations I've had with a number of union presidents, every union that I've talked to, including the two you're going to hear from today, are in growth mode. They are organizing, aggressively organizing. So I want you to hear how these two union presidents talk about that. It's very, very important. So thanks for tuning in to this now non-emergency blogcast. And I hope you enjoy the conversations with President Everett Kelly and President Doreen Greenwald. Enjoy. Hello, powerful people, and welcome to this emergency blogcast on the Power at Work blog. It's an emergency because our country is about to descend into a crisis that's completely unnecessary, but it is going to have meaningful consequences for unionized workers and a lot of other workers. So we wanted to talk with you about it. We'll be talking about the U.S. government shutdown with two national labor leaders who represent federal employees whose work lives are about to be very dramatically disrupted. Our first guest, you can see here, is my friend Everett Kelly, the national president of the American Federation of Government Employees. Everett and the AFG represent the largest number of unionized federal government employees, more than 750,000 employees now. And those employees are going to suffer a gut punch through no fault of their own. So I really wanted to talk with Everett about it. Mr. President, really a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for making the time. I know it's a busy day for you. Thanks for making the time for us.
The pleasure is mine, Seth. It's always good to see you. Thank you for what you do.
Great. Good to see you as well. So, Everett, I'm going to say a bunch of things to our audience that I know you already know, but let me bring them up to speed on what's going on and why we're having this conversation. So we're recording this Friday afternoon, September 29th. The government, the federal government, will shut down at midnight tomorrow night if Congress does not pass some funding mechanism for the federal government, either a short-term funding tool that's known as a continuing resolution or the 12 annual appropriations bills that would fund the government for a full year. So far, no funding mechanism has passed the House of Representatives. They seem incapable of passing anything right now. There is a lot of battling going on inside the Republican conference in the House, and so no bill so far, as far as I know, has passed, at least as of this recording. Without a funding bill, the federal government has to shut down. Now, that's not entirely accurate. It's not the whole government that shuts down. Some federal employees are accepted or exempted, including members of President Kelly's union, and therefore they're required to work without pay while the government is shut down. Other employees will be furloughed. They will not work. They also will not receive pay. None of them will be paid, whether they've worked or not, until the government reopens. And those who've worked are guaranteed by law to be paid, but those who don't work don't have a guarantee by law. Now, Congress has traditionally passed a bill to pay them, but that's not a lock-cinch guarantee. So I can sum it up by saying it's a ridiculous mess. It's an unnecessary crisis, and it's going to have real meaningful consequences for union members Everett represents. So, Mr. President, as of, I believe, yesterday, the agencies and departments of the federal government began notifying your members that the government was very, very likely to shut down. Talk a little bit about the effects of the shutdown on your members.
Well, Seth, thank you very much for having me. And I must say that I'm very concerned, too, about the effects that this shutdown would have on the members that I represent. As you said, I represent about 750,000 federal and D.C. government workers. And we are very concerned because this shutdown does not make sense. The squabbling that's going on inside of the Republican Party, the federal employees become a pawn. They, in my opinion, it seems as if they're in a political theater, right? And when you start talking shutdown, you're talking about families that's not going to have the bare necessities. You're talking about payday going to come, and that's not going to be a paycheck. And payday is when, families that I represent buy groceries. But there's no payday. There's no paycheck rather. Payday is when, families that I represent go and fill their car up so that they can have gas for the next week. But there's no paycheck. So payday without a paycheck is going to be detrimental for the people that I represent because when you look at America, a couple of things that need to be considered. First of all, 60% of working America live from paycheck to paycheck. The people that I represent are no different. They don't have high wages. They many instances at the bottom of the totem pole, averaging and sometimes around $34,000 a paycheck, right? $34,000 a year. I'm sorry. Okay, now a person that lives in a metropolitan area like DC or like New York, how can they really survive, off of that? And then to think about the fact that there is no paycheck coming. The other factor that we have to consider is that the average household debt is about $10,000. Okay? Now, you get a member that I represent, they don't get a paycheck. They still got to have food, right? They still have to get back and forth to work. So they're going to use the credit card, to buy food. They're going to use a credit card to put gas in the car because there's no paycheck. Okay, now what you've done in essence is you've taken out a loan for 28%, because that's the interest rate right now. It's about 28 to 26, 28%. Okay, and so the effects of that is going to be long term, because you're struggling already to pay your bills, and now you got to make a loan for 28% interest, and it's never ending.
Yeah. I think the most important thing that you just helped our audience to understand is that a large percentage of the membership of AFG are not people making big white collar lawyer accountant salaries. They're not the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. we have in our minds when we think about government and what government does. These people are truck drivers. These people are maintenance employees. These people are support staff. When I was at the Labor Department, AFG represented both our national union staff and our field staff. So you have people out in the field who are, inspecting workplaces, inspecting mines. They're making sure that people get their minimum wage. And they're not being paid lavishly. They don't have big savings in their bank accounts. These are working class and middle class people. And so skipping a paycheck is really hard. And I want to add one thing. I want to invite you to talk about this as well, because you and I have talked about this before, and I know how strongly you feel about it. Federal employees really care about their jobs. When I worked with people in the Labor Department, these were people who were really committed to the mission of the agency. They just didn't happen to show up one day and say, oh, here's where the available job is, the Labor Department. I don't want to go and work for Microsoft. I'd rather, they're doing it because they care about the mission of the agency. And now, in a lot of the government, those missions are going to be silenced. They're not going to be able to do their work. I want you to talk a little bit about what it means for your members to be told that your life's work now is expendable until we can sort out the politics in Washington, D.C.
That's great, Seth. And the thing that I love about the people that I represent is that they're so patriotic, right? Now, we take an oath as federal employees. We believe in that oath. We live by that oath. Okay. And many, at least 25% of the federal workforce are veterans who has worn a uniform and now takes on another uniform, and they're being told, now you're locked out of your job. You cannot go to work. And it's not that you're going on strike, right? You are being locked out, and you made a very interesting point. Think about job safety. Our OSHA people that we represent, employers still going to commit crimes and safety violations, but there's nobody around now, if there's a shutdown, to make sure that employee safety is adhered to. So it's going to be devastating, and that's what people need to understand, that the federal workforce is being locked out of their job. They want to do their job. They eager to do their job and want to do their job because it's personal to them. Because to make sure that American public is serviced is personal to the federal workforce.
I think that's certainly consistent with my experience working in the Labor Department for almost 12 years. I feel strongly about that. So let's talk about the role of the union. How are you communicating with your members now, and what, if anything, are you able to do for them?
Well, we had a town hall meeting last night. Thousands of our members was on that call. And we are communicating with them through email and Zoom and teletown hall, and we are providing on our website, resources and ways for our employees, or our members rather, to be helped. We are offering assistance through many various ways, like we did in the last shutdown. We're providing, I guess you would say, a directory of resources that is available for the members that we represent.
Right. And your members have rights under the law. So, and tell me if I'm right about this. In the past, AFG has had to sue to protect the rights of its members in the context of a shutdown. What are you able to do to protect your members' rights, for example, to get their jobs back, to get their pay? What is AFG's role going to be in that?
Well, you rest assured on this. We will do whatever it takes to make sure that the rights of the member that we represent are protected. And our legal department is researching right now as to exactly what we can do and how we need to go about it.
Yeah, it's a frustrating thing. I was going to ask you sort of what you think the mood of your membership is right now. My guess is, I've lived through, as you have, I've lived through several of these shutdowns. I lived through it going back to the Clinton administration when we had the big shutdown when Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House of Representatives. But there have been several. I mean, seemingly every time I've entered, I don't think I'm responsible for it, but every time I've been in government, there have been shutdowns. And I felt a real feeling of frustration and sort of a feeling of impotence. That there's just nothing you can do. The forces that are causing the shutdown are so big. In talking to because I know you're very close to the membership, what are you hearing from the members about how they're feeling, knowing that a federal government shutdown is very, very likely at this point?
Well, Seth, and I have been talking to our members, and they are very frustrated. I used the word yesterday that they are very confused. Okay, because in their mind, it appears that the Congress would have learned from the last shutdown that it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
They're confused because here they are now. They got to have conversations with their families. I talked to one of our, matter of fact, it was a Social Security worker who is a single mother, that had plans for the family, things that they would do. Now they got to have that conversation that I'm not going to be able to do that anymore because of the government shutdown. Now, those kids don't understand anything about a government shutdown. They just know that something that this single mother had promised them is not going to come to fruition anymore. Talk to one member who worked for the Border Patrol. I'm sorry, for the BOP. Who has 5 children, right? And his income, and he saying, "Hey, I can only imagine the struggle that I'm going to have in event of a shutdown. If I miss a paycheck. So they have this feeling of frustration. They have this feeling that I'm in this situation and there is nothing I can do about it. And so we are asking them to continue to call Congress and impress upon the hearts of the Congress, the urgency of them getting the deal done. The bottom line to me is this: they made a deal 3 months ago, okay, and they should live by that. I mean, it tells me something, of how a person think if they can't live by what they agree to.
right. So what you're referring to is that Speaker McCarthy and President Biden made a deal regarding funding levels for the coming year when they were negotiating over increasing the debt ceiling or defaulting on the federal debt, which would have been absolutely catastrophic for the American economy. So Speaker McCarthy and President Biden agreed to how much was going to be spent. And now there are members of Speaker McCarthy's conference in the House who want to spend much, much, much less on certain programs, mostly social service programs. And that's what you're describing, and that is, to a lot of us, that is confusing because you expect that folks are going to live up to the deals that they make. That, in fact, collective bargaining is based on that, right? You sign an agreement, you agree, you shake hands, and your word is good. And
Absolutely.
now maybe not. Okay, I want to ask you just what this means, sort of longer term, for organizing in the union. So do you think, and this is, let me just say, I'm not trying to turn a bad situation into an opportunity, but do you think a government shutdown like this makes it more likely that federal employees will join AFG or the other federal employee unions?
Well, Seth, I would say this: uh, we have been having um, good organizing efforts. I don't know if this in general is going to assist, but people just want to join the union anyway. Um, if you read the headlines, 80% of younger generation, now want to join the union. I think that people are understanding that they need someone to speak on their behalf because you're more powerful when you speak collectively. And so people are understanding that. And the union is growing. My union is growing. I'm so proud of the fact that this union is growing. Uh, as you know, though, 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, our union was going down. Okay, it was going down, 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 and we were given a lifeline. I can just say that, and our union been going up, up, and up. You know, uh, so I think that it's just right now for labor unions because people are understanding the necessity and the urgency of it.
All right. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about organizing because you and I know each other well. You're such a positive person. I hate to spend the whole time talking about something negative. So I want to talk just a little bit more about organizing. So we end on an upbeat note in the context of a crisis that's unnecessary, where your members are going to suffer unnecessary disruption and pain in their lives. But I do want to give some thought of hope going forward. So my understanding is that you're not just growing, you're growing a lot.
Yes.
AFG is growing a lot. The other federal employee unions are growing a lot. And it's happening in two ways. One is you're organizing new members, which is great. And new units are forming, and you're winning elections, or you're getting, you have to win elections. You're in the federal sector, you can't have voluntary recognition. But the other place where you're growing is a lot of people don't know the federal government is a right to work jurisdiction,
right?
Which is a disgrace. It's there's no justification for that. So you have to represent people who refuse to join the union, even in units that you represent, where you represent the whole unit. You can have members sitting right next to non-members, and you have to represent them all. And you're also getting a larger number of those non-members to now join the union. Do I have that right? And here's the punchline. Tell me when AFG will be able to announce that you're at 1 million members.
Oh, wow. Let's see. I hope not too far away from this moment that we might be able to do that. I set a goal for the end of the year because I'm goal oriented. But we reached that goal at the end of July.
Wow.
I've set another goal for next year. Since I met that goal, I set another goal for next year, and I just believe that we'll reach that ahead of time. So I'm marching toward the 1 million membership because our organizers are out there doing an awesome job. They are organizing new units, but they are also organizing people that's been in the workforce for a long time and just never joined the union. And because we are talking to them about why they should be members of the union and the positive thing that the union does, every single day. We give them a reason to want to be a part of AFGE because we talk about issues that they want to change at the work site. And if you can get them involved in issues that they want to change at the work site, then they are more than likely will join the union.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that announcement of 1 million members. And maybe you'll make it right here on the Power at Work blog. Everett Kelly, I can't thank you enough for taking time. I know what a busy day this is and a busy time you're going to have over the weekend. I wish you and your members the best of luck in very, very difficult circumstances. And I'm looking forward to talking to you soon. Everett Kelly, thanks so much.
Thank you, Seth.
So welcome back for the second half of our emergency blogcast about the federal government shutdown. Actually, in the time since our earlier recording, we're now recording Friday at 2 p.m. Friday, September 29th at 2 p.m. In that period, since we recorded earlier today, the U.S. House of Representatives has defeated a continuing resolution, a temporary spending bill that would have kept the government open, all of the government open for some limited period of time. And now that means that a government shutdown looks increasingly likely. The House also passed its own versions of 3 annual spending bills. My assessment is that it's highly unlikely that those 3 bills will be passed by the United States Senate and that President Biden will sign them. There are some policy issues in those bills, to put it politely. And so even if those 3 bills were to be passed by the Senate and signed by President Biden, the large majority of the U.S. government would shut down absent some emergency action being taken. And that's why we're doing this emergency blogcast. And we're very fortunate to have President Doreen Greenwald of the National Treasury Employees Union, I believe the second largest federal employees union. Is that right? You're the second largest after AFG?
That's correct.
And to talk about what this means for her members and her own assessment of it and what her members are saying about it. And so, Madam President, I'm so delighted to have you here to talk about these issues with us today.
So thank you for having me. It's very sad that we are experiencing these trying times yet again. You know, back a couple years ago, we experienced the 35-day shutdown, which was a record and breaking shutdown. And members are still feeling the pain from that shutdown. What people don't realize is federal employees are your neighbors, your friends, your family. They work paycheck to paycheck, just like the average American does. And so to have news like this, that the Congress and the United States government hasn't done their job, which means they won't get paid, even though Congress continues to get paid, is a frustration for our members. Last time we saw just heart-wrenching stories. I myself remember being on phone calls with people, single parents, single income people, calling me to say, I don't know what to do tomorrow. I need to go get my medication and I have no money. I paid my bills not knowing that this was going to keep going on as long as it is. I don't have food. We saw federal employees in lines at food banks. I mean, I don't know what is more devastating than that. And here we are the night before what looks to be an inevitable shutdown. Federal employees are facing this again, and they're scared.
Yeah, and understandably so. Even though the name of your union is the National Treasury Employees Union, you have members in a lot of government agencies, not merely the Treasury Department, although you do have members in the Treasury Department, and you have members in Customs and Border Patrol. You have members in other parts of the government, and they're working people, middle-class people, and they're not going to get a paycheck if the government shuts down. Some of them, though, will be required to work. So tell us a little bit about how you're communicating with them about this situation. What is it? What can the union say? In a minute, I'm going to talk about what can the union do, but what can the union say to its members about this situation and how they can respond to this situation?
So first, let me tell you, we represent 35 federal agencies, of which the second largest agency we represent is Customs and Border Protection. And so, it is key that you're exactly right. These are middle-class employees who go to work every day and rely on those paychecks.
And all over the country. Also, a lot of people think they're all in Washington.
Absolutely. 85% of federal employees work outside of Washington, D.C. This is not a D.C. issue. This is D.C. failing to do its job, but impacting the country. And that's how you really have to look at it. And I've watched some of the things on Congress, and they talk about protecting the border. Well, I'll tell you, our officers on the border that are doing these protections need paychecks. Currently, we're pushing as a union for them to get an additional 4,200 officers to cover all the things that they must protect. And so having not funding to do with the people that they have now, is bad. Having them have to do those jobs without getting paid is worse. And so, and we know we have officers that have been traveled down from the place they've been hired to the southern border to help and protect the southern border. And so can you imagine, not only are you doing a job on the southern border away from your home, but now you've been traveled there and you're not getting a paycheck. So that adds to that stress level tremendously. So not only do we need Congress to do its job to pass all these appropriations, but we need them to properly fund agencies so that they can do the jobs they're hired to do. And so that's key to this. So what can we do as a union? Well, we're educating our members about what's all out there. We're trying to keep them informed. We're making sure we're pressuring agencies to give them the information they need. Believe it or not, they're not getting paid, but they need permission from their agencies if they want to take a side job to help make ends meet. So we have to figure out how to help them with that. We have to figure out are they going to be eligible for unemployment? What are the rules around that? So we try to educate them on that. Sadly, we have to share information like where's a food bank you can go to if you need that? Is there loans available that you can do? Can you get creditor letters from your agency that helps give you some time to pay? The law changed after the last shutdown that gives them pay when they return once appropriations are passed. But good luck paying your bills with an IOU. And that's what the government's offering currently. And they don't show up at work and get their full paycheck. It takes weeks and sometimes months to get the back pay that they're due. So it just spirals, and they don't get paid for their late fees or any additional expenses of interest or things that are added to their bills. So this is something that they feel every day of a shutdown. And not only that, don't think they're on vacation, because they have to stay in tune to the radio and the news, because if they're called back, they have to be ready to report. So this is just a constant stressful event that they have no control over. And so it is a pressure to them. And they ask, well, how come the people in Congress get paid and I don't? I'm here to do my job. They're preventing me from doing my job, yet they keep getting paid. So that is another frustration level.
Yeah, and I'll add even another layer to that frustration, and this is from my own experience in at the U.S. Department of Labor, and I had this conversation with Everett, but I want to mention it to you as well and give you a chance to comment on it. Is the federal employees I've worked with, as a general matter, it's not true with every single one. No organization, human beings are different, but as a general matter, people who work in the federal government really care about the mission of their agency. And so their frustration is not merely that they are being disrupted, that their lives are being disrupted, that they're going to miss a paycheck or two or three. You mentioned a 35-day government shutdown. That can be 3 paychecks for a lot of people. But also they're not able to serve the American people. Those who are furloughed are stopped from doing their jobs serving the American people. And that's what they're there for. They're public servants, and they're really committed to it. I want to give you a chance to comment on that as well.
You are absolutely correct. I worked for the IRS before becoming the national president for 35 years. So I work closely with federal employees. And I will tell you, they are committed to the agency's mission. When we were on the shutdown the last time for 35 days, I got calls from my members, and they would say, I have this case file. I promised I'd get back to somebody. They won't let me go into the office. They won't let me call them back. What is this poor person who's waiting for this refund going to do without me working? Their first and foremost concern has always been to the job. Even over these last decade or so, when federal agencies really saw cuts to staffing and not enough resources for them to do their jobs, federal employees are what delivered for the government. They come in and day out and want to serve the American people. They have a sense of pride in what they do for this country. They take an oath to the Constitution, and they are proud of the work they do for the American people. And so this hurts them in so many levels, not just their family and their paychecks, but the pride they have in their organization. And I will tell you, I'll go one step further. The government needs to hire. They need the next generation to carry that mantle forward. Who wants to work for a government who can take away your pay at a moment's notice because they're not doing their job? It's going to be harder to recruit people with the skill levels needed to do these jobs. And so, to me, a shutdown has lasting effects.
Yeah, what adds to the frustration is it's unpredictable and has no legitimate purpose. Right? It's very hard to articulate what is the purpose in shutting down the government. I mean, there are people on Capitol Hill who are trying to make the case for it, but they don't have the votes for their position, and yet we're going to end up shutting the government down. We're going to end up taking services away from people who need them, and the people who are providing those services are going to be, many of them, going to be sitting at home, or they're going to be working with no pay. It's utterly nonsensical. That has to magnify the frustration. And let me also say, my guess is that a lot of your members are sitting at home and getting calls from their relatives who are, or friends or acquaintances who are saying to them, can you explain this to me? I don't understand. What are you people doing up there? What is the government doing? It's not the government doing this. It's Congress that's doing this. It's not your members who are doing this. So I want to turn from communications to what NTEU is planning to do and able to do to protect your members' rights. To the extent your members have rights in this context, how are you approaching that issue? How do you figure out what their rights are, and how do you go about protecting them in the context of a government shutdown?
Well, you're absolutely right. Our members and federal employees in general have no say about a shutdown. Trust me, if they did, we would never see another shutdown again, because this is no way to operate a government. And quite frankly, taxpayers and people who go out and vote need to pay attention to a shutdown, because what that means is you've put people in power that aren't getting the work done, right? You send people to Congress to make change and do things that will improve the federal government, not create chaos and shut down the federal government. So to me, that's a failure on that level. That said, what we try to do for our members and federal employees is, first of all, there was big movement the last time when we had the record shutdown. Passing a law that guaranteed them back pay didn't exist before. And so that is a positive step, because at least they know at some point they will get paid. In prior shutdowns, they didn't know that. And I will tell you, there's a lot of federal contractors out there that will not get paid because they weren't part of that law. And so that is something that, as a union, we pushed very hard for, was protections for federal employees to ensure they were paid eventually once the government got their act together. The next thing we have contracts with our agencies. And so we have negotiated agreements with them about what the procedures are when a shutdown occurs and what they can expect. So a lot of their rights are protected in that contract, such as if they have grievances outstanding or steps that they need to take. We've built in timeframes and days that will protect them going forward. We're also working with the agencies to make sure they communicate out all their rights and benefits so that they're covered in that and that we work with them going forward. So there's a lot of things in play, but some of it's just unknown. And so we work on the Hill as well to make sure that we're expressing what the needs are, telling the stories of federal employees so that as they pass bills and pass these appropriations, that they're looking out for federal employees. Federal employees are doing the work of Congress. Congress passes the law. It's not that the agencies create these things and do them. They're enacting the work of Congress. And so I find it kind of ironic that Congress complains, and really in these last several years, this is the first time I've seen as a federal employee for 35 years, the negative rhetoric that is out there about federal employees. Federal employees are hardworking. They are dedicated to the service. They're dedicating to delivering for the American people. And they should be held up and lifted up for the great work they do. It is something they take on as a passion. They don't come to the federal government to get rich. They don't come to the federal government because it's better than anything in the private sector. That's not true. They're committed to the mission, and they take an oath and they take it seriously. And so in order for the civil service to continue and deliver for the American people, we have to make sure that we protect that. And so this union is working very hard to make sure their rights as civil servants are protected.
Right. And you could have added that they're not a cabal of deep state conspirators trying to overthrow the government from within or manage the government from within. That's just not how it works. That's the kind of scare tactics that might work in a political campaign or in organizing a political movement. It's just not true. It's not in any way an accurate depiction of how career civil servants do their job. So I want to ask you, if you don't mind, I apologize for this. I want to ask you a slightly personal question. Not very personal question, but a slightly personal question. So you're a pretty new union president. You've been in all, how many months have you been the president of NTEU?
Little over a month, one.
One month. Did you think this is where you would be after 1 month?
I was prepared for it. So let me say, before I took over as national president, I spent 14 years as a chapter president out of Milwaukee,
Right.
Wisconsin. And we did, unfortunately, had to help our chapter and our members at that level deal with these shutdowns. So it's not new to me. It's unfortunate. It's not something you ever want to see, because obviously our members are going to suffer. And our goal is to either prevent this shutdown in any way we can, or work to bring it to a close as quickly as possible before individuals and their families are hurt. And the American people are hurt. So we have to break through some of these myths out there and really educate people about the damage that a shutdown causes. This is not about bringing change to the government. This does not do anything positive for the government. It harms employees. And federal employees, as you said, they're not the deep state. They're not the swamp. They are Americans. And they are conservative, they're liberal, and everything in between. They vote Democrat, Republican, and independent. But what I will tell you is when they enter the door and they start to do the work as a federal employee, the first thing they do is that oath to the Constitution. They leave their politics at the door and they deliver for the American people. And that's their only focus. And what they want to do is continue to work.
Right. So I want to turn a little bit to them. I hate to, I mean, this is such a negative topic, and this is such an unnecessary crisis, and we're spending so much time talking about something that we just should not have to be spending any time talking about. So I want to use just the last few minutes of our time together to talk about a more positive topic. I think it's a positive topic. My understanding is it is a positive topic for NTEU, and that's organizing. How is your organizing going? How is your growth, Maybe that's also a part of the story is youth. How is your growth going? Because my understanding is that we're not just seeing a little bit of union growth in the federal sector. We're seeing meaningful, substantial growth in the first 2 years of the Biden presidency in the federal sector. Am I hearing that right? And is NTEU a part of that growth? And how do you explain it if you are?
Well, NTU looks at organizing as a positive always. So we always look to grow both the width of our organization. Obviously, I said we have 35 federal agencies. We're always looking to add on to that where it makes sense. We are fortunate. We just added on representatives of BLM, which is our Bureau of Land Management, some of our newest agencies, and FHFA to the NTU family. And so we're very proud to have them on board. In addition, we are working to grow within. So among the 35 agencies, we always are looking to add more membership and build our strength within as well. The Biden administration has been very supportive of federal unions and supportive of unions in general and the right for employees to have a voice in the workplace. And I also think this new generation that's going to be entering the workforce is viewing unions in a different way than past generations have. So we're embracing that. We're looking to educate employees about the importance of having a voice in the workplace and having a union to represent them and be that voice. Federal employees know the work they do, and they're the best ones to help make the government operate efficiently. And so we want to make sure that voice continues to grow in the workplace and make sure that the federal government is the model employer it should be and set the tone for private sector. And so unions help do that. And so, I think it's been a positive thing having the Biden administration support unions, but I also think it's the future. And unions are coming out and really re-identifying for workers the importance of having that voice in the workplace and coming together united behind important issues for federal employees.
Okay, let me give you a chance to make some news. What will the membership of NTEU be in 5 years? What's the
Well,
goal?
what's the goal? Well, the goal is to increase the membership, obviously. What that's going to take
You
is
don't
some
want to give us a number? You could make a headline right now. What do you
Well,
think
I
the
mean,
number is going to
you
be?
know, I like, we're at 150,000 right now that we represent, and we're growing. I mean, ultimately, that's going to depend on Congress passing the appropriate appropriations and right sizing federal agencies. They need to turn around this thought that having smaller government is better. What they should be looking at is an efficient government and making sure the government is dealing with the economy of today and not comparing it to economies of the past. And so, yeah, I would love to see 200,000 or more going forward for our union. And I'm not afraid to say that. But again, it's going to take some movement in Congress to make sure our agencies are hiring appropriately.
Well, I'm confident you're going to be able to get there because I'm hearing about your organizing all over the country and within the bargaining units that you already have. And so I'm not going to give a number because I'm not qualified to do that, but I'm really confident. President Doreen Greenwald, I know you have a very, very busy day and a very difficult and busy weekend ahead of you, and I'm so grateful to you for taking time to talk to the Power at Work blog. Let me just close out, if you don't mind waiting with us for just a second. I want to thank our audience for coming on the blog, to the Power at Work blog, to watch this emergency blogcast about the government shutdown. Thanks to Asia Sims, our technical producer, and our producer for her terrific work. And thanks to all of you. Follow us on social media. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter X, whatever you want to call it, Threads. We're out there. And come to the blog and subscribe so you can see terrific content like this. Even if it's an emergency, you can see these kinds of great interviews with folks like President Doreen Greenwald. Thank you so much for being with us.